Tom Baker sat at his monitoring station in the Deep Space Observation Center in Nevada, sipping his third cup of coffee. The midnight shift was usually quiet, filled with routine scans and regular data collection. That's why the sudden alert from his computer made him spill hot coffee all over his desk. "What in the world?" he muttered, quickly wiping his hands on his pants. The computer screen showed something massive entering the solar system, but it wasn't moving like any natural object he had ever seen. Tom double-checked his readings, then triple-checked them. His hands shook as he reached for the phone to call his supervisor. Within minutes, Jane Wilson, the head of night operations, rushed into the room. "Show me everything," she ordered, leaning over his shoulder to look at the screen. The data was clear now. More than 50 large objects were drifting into the solar system. They weren't moving fast, but their size was incredible. The smallest one was bigger than any space station humans had ever built. "They're not accelerating or slowing down," Tom pointed out. "They're just drifting." Jane grabbed her secure phone and made a call. Within an hour, every major space agency on Earth was awake and watching the strange objects. The military got involved too, but they could only wait and watch as the mysterious fleet got closer. 3 days later, the whole world knew about the visitors. News channels couldn't talk about anything else. Scientists argued about what the objects might be, while regular people either panicked or celebrated. Some bought all the food they could find, while others threw parties to welcome humanity's first alien contact. The International Space Response Force, a new organization created just 2 years ago for situations like this, took charge. They sent out their best ship, the Starseeker, to make first contact. Captain Mark Watson stood on the bridge, watching as they got closer to the alien fleet. "Status report," he called out to his crew. "Sir, we're picking up some strange readings," replied Jack, his sensor operator. "These ships, they're completely without power. No engine output, no energy signatures. They're just coasting." This was strange. The alien ships were huge and clearly advanced, with smooth metal surfaces that seemed to shine with their own light. But they were just floating in space, like boats lost at sea. As the Starseeker got closer, they started receiving weak distress signals. The computer took a few hours to decode them, but finally, words appeared on their screens. "Help. Life support failing. Quantum drive collapse. 50,000 civilians. Please help." The message repeated over and over. Captain Watson looked at his crew, seeing the same determination in their eyes that he felt. These weren't invaders. They were refugees who needed help. "Send a message back," he ordered. "Tell them we're here to help. And get me Earth Command. They need to know what we're dealing with." The Starseeker moved carefully between the massive alien ships. Their cameras showed incredible sights. Ships that looked like they were built by artists as much as engineers, with graceful curves and patterns that seemed to flow like water. But now these beautiful vessels were dark and silent, drifting helplessly through space. "Life signs confirmed," Jack announced. "Lots of them. Different from human readings, but definitely alive. And sir, their life support systems are running on backup power. They don't have much time left." Captain Watson nodded grimly. "Send all data back to Earth. We're going to need every expert, every ship, and every resource we can get. This just became the biggest rescue mission in human history." As the Starseeker's crew worked to establish better communication with the alien ships, Watson looked out at the fleet through his viewport. Humanity had dreamed of first contact for centuries, but nobody had expected it to happen like this. These advanced beings needed help, and despite all their incredible technology, it would be up to humans to save them. The real challenge was just beginning, and time was running out. The Starseeker's docking tube connected with a soft thud to the largest alien ship. Captain Watson led his first contact team, including Dr. Alex Miller, their xenobiologist, and Robert Smith, their chief engineer. They all wore their standard spacesuits, not knowing what they would find inside. "Remember," Watson said through the radio, "we're here to help, but stay alert. We don't know anything about them yet." The airlock cycled, and they floated into the alien ship. Emergency lights cast a soft blue glow through the corridors. The inside of the ship was beautiful, with walls that looked like flowing water frozen in time. But now, without power, it felt like walking through a dying work of art. They found the aliens in the main control room. The beings were tall and slim, with silver-blue skin that seemed to shimmer even in the dim light. They stood on 2 legs but had 4 arms, and their large eyes glowed slightly in the darkness. One of the aliens stepped forward. It wore what looked like a uniform covered in swirling patterns. The alien spoke, and their computer translator worked to understand the words. "I am First Navigator Dan," the alien said through the translator. "We thank you for responding to our distress call." The name wasn't really Dan. It was much longer, but the translator simplified it for human ears. Dr. Miller stepped forward. "We're here to help. Can you tell us what happened?" The story came out slowly. The aliens, who called themselves the Meridians, had been fleeing from their dying star system. Their sun had suddenly become unstable, forcing them to evacuate millions of people. These ships carried the first group of refugees, but something had gone terribly wrong. "Our quantum drives failed," Dan explained, leading them to a massive engine room. Robert whistled when he saw the technology. The engine was beautiful, like a piece of abstract art made of metal and light, but it was completely dead. "We've never seen anything fail like this," Dan continued. "The quantum matrix collapsed in all our ships at once. We can't restart them. Without the drives, we have no power for our main systems." Robert floated closer to the engine, scanning it with his tools. "This is way beyond our technology level," he admitted. "But maybe that's not a bad thing. Sometimes simpler is better." The aliens looked confused. First Navigator Dan tilted his head. "Your species, you're still using chemical rockets and basic ion drives. How could you possibly help us?" Watson smiled behind his helmet. "We might not have quantum drives, but we have something else. Experience with solving problems using whatever we have on hand. Rob, what are you thinking?" Robert was already drawing diagrams on his tablet. "Their backup systems are similar to old submarine emergency power." "That's good. We can work with that. But these ships are huge. Moving them will be the real challenge." More human ships arrived over the next few hours. Engineers and scientists from every space agency crowded into the alien vessels, studying their systems and making plans. The Meridians watched with a mixture of hope and doubt. The biggest problem became clear quickly. The alien ships carried 50,000 refugees, and their emergency power would only last another 2 weeks. Earth's best ships could carry maybe 100 people each, and there weren't enough of them to evacuate everyone. "We need to move these ships," Watson said during the emergency meeting. "Not just the people, the ships themselves. These are their homes now. They've lost everything else." First Navigator Dan looked at the humans with all 4 hands clasped together. A gesture of worry. "Even if you could move our ships, where would we go? We have nowhere left." Watson looked at the reports coming in from Earth. Every nation was offering help, opening their space stations, and even offering land for the refugees to settle. "You have somewhere," he said. "Earth isn't perfect, but we take care of our neighbors, even the ones from other stars." As the meeting ended, Robert was already organizing teams of engineers. They had 2 weeks to solve an impossible problem: moving ships bigger than cities without their main engines. But as he looked at his fellow humans already sketching plans and arguing about solutions, he knew they would find a way. They had to. 50,000 lives depended on it. Robert sat in the crowded meeting room aboard the International Space Station. Engineers from 20 different countries argued around him, their voices getting louder by the minute. On the big screen, First Navigator Dan watched with growing concern. "It's impossible," shouted one engineer. slamming his hand on the table. "We can't move ships that big. The physics don't work." "The physics don't work with our normal methods," Robert replied calmly. He stood up and walked to the whiteboard. "But we're not giving up. Let's break down the problem." He wrote 3 points on the board. 1. 50,000 aliens to save. 2. 13 days of life support left. 3. Ships too big for traditional towing. The room got quiet. When Robert turned around, he saw Captain Watson had entered. The captain nodded at him to continue. "Look," Robert said, "we've been thinking about this like it's a space rescue, but maybe we need to think about it differently. These ships are more like—" He paused, thinking. "They're like sailing ships caught in the doldrums." First Navigator Dan's translator crackled. "What are doldrums?" "Places on Earth's oceans where there's no wind," Watson explained. "In the old days, sailing ships would get stuck there, sometimes for weeks." Robert smiled. "Exactly. And you know what they did? They used smaller boats to tow the big ships out. Not one boat, many boats working together." The engineers started talking again, but this time with excitement. Ideas flew around the room. Someone pulled up old videos of tugboats moving aircraft carriers. Another person showed pictures of solar sails. Then Mary, a quiet engineer from Canada, stood up. "I have an idea," she said. Everyone turned to look at her. "We've been trying to figure out how to pull the ships. But what if we push them instead?" She walked to the computer and brought up a diagram. "Look, the alien ships have these smooth hulls. If we position small ships behind them with powerful thrusters, we could create a directed plasma stream, like bowling balls being pushed by water jets." The room exploded with activity. Engineers broke into groups, running calculations. Robert watched as the impossible started to look possible. But then First Navigator Dan spoke up. "Your ships are too small. You would need hundreds of them." "Then we'll use hundreds," Watson said firmly. "Every space agency on Earth is offering their ships. Private space companies too. We can do this." The next few hours were intense. They calculated fuel requirements, thrust angles, and coordination patterns. The plan was crazy, but it might work. They would need 300 ships working together, pushing the alien fleet like leaves on a river. "There's one more problem," Robert said, looking at his final calculations. "We need more ships than we have. And we need them fast." Watson smiled. "Already solved. While you all were working this out, Earth's governments made a decision. Every rocket factory on the planet is now working on emergency ships. Simple ones. Just engines, fuel tanks, and remote controls. They're calling it the Space Bridge Project." First Navigator Dan's eyes glowed brighter, a sign of hope in their culture. "You would do this for us? Build an entire fleet of ships?" "Of course," Watson said. "That's what neighbors do." As the meeting ended, Robert stayed behind to clean up the whiteboard. Mary helped him, erasing equations and diagrams. "Do you think it will work?" she asked quietly. Robert looked at the final plan displayed on the screen. It was ambitious, dangerous, and unlike anything humans had ever tried. But when he thought about the 50,000 lives at stake, he knew they had to try. "It has to work," he said. "And you know what? I think it will. Because when humans are backed into a corner, that's when we come up with our best ideas." Outside the station's window, Earth glowed blue and green. Already, rockets were launching from every spaceport on the planet, carrying parts and fuel for the rescue mission. The greatest engineering challenge in human history had begun, and they had less than 2 weeks to make it work. The clock was ticking. The launch sites on Earth never stopped. Day and night, rockets roared into the sky. Every space center, from Florida to Kazakhstan, worked at full speed. In just 5 days, humans had launched more ships than they had in the last 3 years combined. Mary watched from the command center they'd set up on the International Space Station. Hundreds of small ships filled her screens, each one a simple design. Just engines, fuel tanks, and control systems. They called them pushers, and they were humanity's answer to an impossible problem. "Fleet status report," Captain Watson asked, floating into the room. 247 pushers in position, Mary replied. "Another 40 launching today. We're ahead of schedule." Robert entered next, carrying his tablet. He looked tired but excited. The test runs worked perfectly. We linked 10 pushers to move a small asteroid. The coordination system handles it automatically. First Navigator Dan watched all this from his ship. The alien leader had been skeptical at first, but now there was wonder in his glowing eyes. "Your species continues to surprise us," Dan said through the translator. "We would never have thought of such a simple solution. Our technology always aimed for elegance and complexity. Sometimes the simple solutions are the best ones," Robert replied. He brought up a new diagram on the main screen. "Look at this. We've mapped out the exact position for each pusher ship. They'll work together like a school of fish, all moving in perfect sync." The plan was coming together. Each pusher ship would lock its plasma stream onto a specific point of the alien vessels. Working together, they would create a massive pushing force. It wasn't elegant, but it would work. 7 days of life support left, Mary reminded everyone. "We need to start the real operation soon." Watson nodded. "Tomorrow. We start tomorrow." The next day, everyone watched as the first real test began. 20 pusher ships moved into position behind the smallest alien vessel. Robert held his breath as they activated their engines. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Then, slowly, the alien ship began to move. "It's working," someone shouted. The room erupted in cheers. But their celebration was cut short. Alarms started blaring. "The plasma stream is reflecting off their hull," Mary shouted. "It's creating heat buildup in the pusher ships." Robert's fingers flew over his controls, shutting down engines. "Everyone back off." The test stopped. No damage was done, but it was a close call. The alien ship's super smooth hulls, which they had thought would help, were actually causing problems. First Navigator Dan spoke up. Perhaps we could help." Everyone turned to look at the screen. "Our hull design includes emergency texture controls. With the last of our backup power, we could create grip points for your plasma streams." Robert's eyes lit up. "You can change your hull surface?" "That's perfect. We can create exactly the pattern we need." The next 12 hours were intense. The Meridians used their remaining power to create special patterns on their ships' hulls, rough patches perfectly spaced for the pusher ships to target. Meanwhile, human engineers adjusted their plasma streams to match. "Ready for second test," Mary announced. The room got quiet again. This time, when the pushers activated, everything worked perfectly. The plasma streams locked onto the rough patches, creating stable pushing points. The alien ship moved smoothly through space. "Full power test," Watson ordered. More pushers moved into position. The alien ship picked up speed, moving exactly as planned. First Navigator Dan's voice was full of emotion. "You did it. You actually did it." "No," Watson corrected him. "We did it. Together. Your hull modification made this possible." This is what happens when different species work together. We solve problems neither of us could solve alone. Robert looked at his screens, watching the successful test results pour in. They had found a way. Now they just needed to scale it up. Way up. Tomorrow, they would begin moving the entire fleet. "Get some rest, everyone," Watson ordered. "Tomorrow, we make history." As the team dispersed, Robert stayed behind, looking out the window at the fleet of pusher ships. They looked tiny next to the massive alien vessels, but together they would accomplish something incredible. Sometimes the biggest problems needed the smallest solutions, and a lot of them working together. The big day arrived. 315 pusher ships floated in formation around the alien fleet. Each human ship was in its assigned position, ready to begin the largest space rescue in history. All ships report ready, Mary announced from her station. The command center was packed with engineers, scientists, and mission controllers. On the main screen, they could see the entire fleet spread out before them. Captain Watson took a deep breath. "Begin Phase 1, he ordered. The first wave of pusher ships activated their engines. Blue plasma streams reached out and touched the alien ships exactly where the meridians had created rough patches on their hulls. Slowly, the massive vessels began to move. "First wave stable," Robert reported. "Adding second wave." More pushers joined in. The alien ships picked up speed, moving like giant whales being guided by tiny fish. Everything was going according to plan. Then the solar radiation alarm went off. Solar flare detected. Someone shouted. "Massive one, coming right at us." First Navigator Dan's voice came through, worried. "Our ships have no radiation shielding without main power. Our people." "We've got this," Watson said firmly. He turned to his crew. "New plan. People. We need ideas. Now." Robert was already moving. "The pusher ships," he said excitedly. "We can use them as shields." Mary caught on immediately. "If we reposition them on the sun-facing side of the alien ships, their plasma streams could deflect most of the radiation." "But that would change our whole movement plan," someone protested. "Then we make a new plan," Watson said. "Right now. Mary, start calculating new positions. Robert, get me a power distribution model. Everyone else, prepare for emergency maneuvers." The next few minutes were chaos, but organized chaos. Humans were good at this, adapting, changing plans, making things work with whatever they had. "Flare hitting in 10 minutes, called out the sensor operator. The pusher ships began to move, taking up new positions. Instead of being evenly spread out, they now clustered more heavily on one side of the alien fleet. Their plasma streams would do double duty, pushing and protecting. "Power redistribution ready," Robert announced. "We'll lose some pushing force, but the plasma streams should deflect enough radiation to keep everyone safe." First Navigator Dan watched in amazement. "To change an entire rescue plan in minutes, how do you do this?" "Practice," Watson said with a smile. "On Earth, we have to deal with unexpected problems all the time. You learn to adapt or you fail." The solar flare hit. The readings spiked on every sensor, but the makeshift shield held. Inside the alien ships, radiation levels stayed within safe limits. "Shield holding," Mary reported. "But we're using more power than planned. Some pusher ships are running low on fuel." "Launch the reserves," Watson ordered. 20 more pusher ships, held back for emergencies, moved into position. They took over for the ships running low on fuel, maintaining the shield while keeping the fleet moving. Hours passed. The flare faded, but its effects had changed everything. They had used more fuel than planned, pushed their ships harder than intended, but they had also learned something important. "Look at these readings," Robert said, showing his tablet to Watson. "The plasma streams actually work better in this new configuration. We're getting 20% more efficiency." "A crisis forcing us to find a better way," Watson mused. "Typical human luck." First Navigator Dan's voice carried new respect. "We would never have attempted such a rapid change of plans. Our simulations would have taken days to calculate new positions." "Sometimes you can't wait for perfect calculations," Mary said. "Sometimes you have to trust your instincts and your training, and just make it work." The fleet continued moving, now faster than before thanks to their accidentally discovered better formation. Earth grew larger in their view, a blue welcome sign for the refugees. Watson looked at his tired but proud crew. "Status report." "Fleet is maintaining speed," Mary replied. "All ships stable. At current pace," she smiled, "we'll reach Earth orbit 12 hours ahead of schedule." The rescue wasn't over yet, but they had overcome their biggest challenge, not by having the most advanced technology, but by being willing to adapt and change when things went wrong. That was the human way. The alien fleet hung in Earth orbit, their silver hulls reflecting the blue planet below. After the success of the rescue mission, both humans and Meridians had time to finally learn about each other. Robert walked through the main corridor of the largest alien ship, now partially powered by human generators. Beside him, First Navigator Dan pointed out different parts of their technology. "This is our atmosphere processor," Dan explained, showing him a beautiful crystal-like machine. "It uses quantum mechanics to create perfect air mixtures." "Amazing," Robert said, studying it. "But what happens if it breaks?" Dan looked confused. "Break? It is not supposed to break. It is perfect." "Nothing's perfect," Robert replied kindly. "That's why we always build backup systems, simple ones that can't fail." More humans and Meridians were meeting throughout the fleet. In one room, Mary taught a group of alien engineers about Earth's different power sources, everything from nuclear power to simple steam engines. "But these are so basic," one Meridian said, looking at the diagrams. "Basic isn't bad," Mary explained. "Basic means reliable. When our advanced systems fail, these simple ones keep working." In another part of the ship, Captain Watson met with the Meridian Leadership Council. They sat around a table, humans and aliens together, planning for the future. "We offer you our quantum technology," the Meridian chief scientist said. "It is the least we can do to repay your help." Watson smiled. "We accept, but with one condition. Let us help you make it better." "Better?" The aliens looked confused. How could primitive technology improve our advanced systems? "By making them more reliable," Watson explained. "Your quantum drives are incredible, but they all failed at once. We can help you build backup systems, emergency protocols, and safety measures." Understanding began to dawn in the aliens' glowing eyes. They had built their civilization on the pursuit of perfect advanced technology. But humans had built theirs on making things work, no matter what. In the ship's medical bay, human doctors and Meridian healers shared knowledge. The aliens had amazing treatments using quantum energy, but they were amazed by simple human solutions like stitches and splints. "Sometimes the old ways are the best ways," a human doctor explained, demonstrating how to set a broken bone without any technology. First Navigator Dan and Robert ended their tour in the observation room. Looking down at Earth, ships moved back and forth between the planet and the fleet, carrying supplies and people. "We were wrong about humans," Dan admitted. "We thought you were primitive because your technology was simple. Now we see that simplicity has its own kind of advancement." Robert nodded. "And we can learn from you too. Your quantum technology is amazing. Together, we could combine the best of both worlds, advanced systems with reliable backups." The door opened and Mary rushed in, excited. "You need to see this," she said, holding up her tablet. "We fixed their quantum drive." They hurried to the engine room. Human and Meridian engineers stood around the massive quantum engine. But now it looked different. Simple mechanical systems had been added around the complex quantum parts. "We added regular backup generators," Mary explained, "and mechanical safety switches. If the quantum field starts to collapse, these systems take over automatically. No computers needed, just basic physics." Dan studied the changes. "This goes against everything we believed about technology. We always thought newer and more complex meant better." "Progress isn't always about making things more complicated," Robert said. "Sometimes it's about finding the simplest solution that works." As they talked, more plans were being made. The Meridians would help humans understand quantum technology, while humans would teach them about redundancy and simple solutions. Both civilizations would grow stronger together. Outside, Earth still turned below them, but it wasn't just humanity's home anymore. It was becoming a shared world, where advanced technology and simple wisdom could exist side by side. The rescue mission had ended, but something much bigger was just beginning. 1 year had passed since the Great Rescue. The Meridian ships still orbited Earth, but they looked different now. Their sleek hulls had been modified with a mix of both human and alien technology. Solar panels and backup engines sat alongside quantum systems, creating something entirely new. Robert stood in the new Human Meridian Space Academy, watching students from both species working together. Young humans learned about quantum mechanics while Meridian students practiced basic engineering with nuts, bolts, and wrenches. "Still hard to believe how much has changed," Mary said, joining him at the window. She now led the Joint Technology Development Program. "All because of a broken engine," Robert replied with a smile. Captain Watson, now Admiral Watson, entered the room with First Navigator Dan. The two had become close friends over the past year, each learning from the other's way of thinking. "The new ships are ready for testing," Dan announced. His translator wasn't needed anymore. He had learned English, just as many humans had learned the Meridian language. They walked together to the observation deck. Below them, a new kind of spacecraft sat on the launch pad. It was smaller than the old Meridian ships, but larger than human vessels. Its hull shimmered with the characteristic Meridian style, but solid human engineering showed in its structure. "First joint design ship," Watson said proudly. "Quantum drive with mechanical backups, solar power support, and even good old-fashioned chemical rockets for emergencies. 3 ways to get home," Robert added. "That's what we call redundancy." The ship wasn't just a vessel. It was a symbol. Humans and Meridians had spent the year building trust and sharing knowledge. The refugees had been welcomed on Earth, bringing their advanced science to help solve human problems. In return, humans had taught them about backup plans, simple solutions, and the importance of being prepared for anything. "Launch control reports ready," Mary said, checking her tablet. They watched as the new ship lifted off. Its quantum drive hummed to life, creating a beautiful blue field around the hull. But underneath that advanced technology, reliable human engineering kept everything stable and safe. "The first of many," Dan said. "These ships will help us rescue the rest of our people. Millions still wait in the evacuation ships near our home system. And this time, we'll be ready," Watson added. "No more emergencies, no more last-minute solutions needed." The ship reached orbit successfully, its systems working perfectly. As they celebrated, Robert noticed a group of children in the academy below. Human and Meridian kids playing together, sharing toys that mixed both cultures' technology. "That's the real success," he said, pointing. "Not the ships or the technology. It's them. The next generation won't see any difference between human and Meridian ideas. They'll just use whatever works best." Mary nodded. "Simple or advanced, new or old, they'll have all the options." First Navigator Dan's eyes glowed with pride. "We came here as refugees, thinking our advanced technology made us superior. We learned that true advancement comes from being open to all solutions, not just the complex ones. And we learned that we don't have to stay primitive to keep our practical wisdom," Watson added. "We can have both." Above them, the new ship completed its test flight, landing perfectly. Its success proved what both species had learned. The best solution wasn't always the most advanced one, or the simplest one. It was the one that took the best from both worlds. As they walked back to the academy, Robert saw more ships under construction. Some would go to rescue the remaining Meridians, others would explore space together. Each one carried the same message, that sometimes the greatest discoveries come from the most unexpected situations. What had started as a desperate rescue mission had become something much more. It had taught two civilizations that true progress wasn't about choosing between simple and advanced technology. It was about working together, learning from each other, and being ready for whatever the universe might bring next. The stars waited above them, holding new challenges and adventures. But this time, they would face them together, with the perfect balance of quantum science and human ingenuity. The end.